Okay, I think oh wait, is it recording?
Yeah, it does.
It is okay, I think so. All right. So, will you start by telling everybody who you are? Did you hear me?
Yeah, yes. So I'm Mackenzie. I through hiked the Appalachian Trail in 2018, so 2 years ago. And I am from Maryland and know Keegan through cross country.
Miss Van Wert.
Through cross
Okay,
country.
they already all know my first name.
Oh, goodness. Thank good.
It's on my YouTube channel already. So they're all like, we know your first name.
Very good.
All right. So, what does it mean that you hiked through?
Yeah, so that means through hiking is where you hike the entire distance of the Appalachian Trail. So the Appalachian Trail starts in Georgia and it ends in Maine. And so through hiking just means you hike the whole distance. And you can either do it, in one direction, either going north, starting in Georgia and ending in Maine, or going the opposite direction, or you can do what's called flip-flopping, which is where you can kind of do sections and do a bunch of different sections and jump around. But as long as you hike the whole distance and, the whole trail, then you're considered a through hiker.
All right. And which way did you go?
I went northbound. So it started in Georgia and then finished in Maine.
And how long did it take you?
About 5 months.
Ooh, how long does it take most people?
It can take, like, regular people who aren't running. It's usually 4.5 to, I would say. And then you can be faster or slower, but that's pretty unusual. The majority of people fall in that range.
Did you run it at all?
One day I ran once. It's hard to do with a backpack, but there was one day where someone they took my backpack and dropped it off 20 miles ahead of me. And so I just jogged.
For 20 miles?
Yeah, just once.
Oh my. That's crazy. Oh, talk about a long jog. Okay, what about your backpack? What kind of stuff did you pack?
Yeah, so I had a tent and a sleeping bag and a sleeping pad. So basic, shelter requirements. And then I had a stove, and I always carried some food and water with me. Some clothes. So I always changed into different clothes at night. And then that was pretty much it, honestly. I had a toothbrush, toothpaste, a comb, a flashlight, and a water filter, because we got water from like streams. So I had a filter so that I could, make sure I was drinking clean water.
Did you hike all by yourself?
Sometimes, not all the time. So I started alone. I didn't know anyone when I started, but a lot of people through hike now, and a lot of people started when I did. So I met people on the trail pretty much immediately. And we have what we call tramilies, or trail families, which is where you meet people on trail and you form a little mini family, and you hike together and stay and like have dinner together. And if you go into town, you usually get a hotel room together. So I had a few tramilies during the time. So usually for about a month, I would have a group of people that I would hike with for that whole month.
That's pretty cool. So what was the hardest thing? What do you think was the most difficult thing or the biggest change?
I would say the hardest thing was just dealing with the weather. So, a lot of things you can control, like what you're carrying and the distance you hike every day, how long you're hiking. But the one big, a major factor to how your day went was weather. So there were days where there was like a heat wave and it would be 100 degrees for like 4 days, and you'd just be stuck in the heat because there's nothing you could do, and sleeping in it, which is unfortunate. Or there was 6 weeks of rain.
Oh my goodness.
Which was just, yeah, all the rain and like all the trails flooded. So we went through like that. I think the worst were like the ups and downs of the weather. So there were like droughts where you wouldn't get water, and there were floods where there was lots of water. And that would really change, the way you were hiking and the way it felt to be hiking and to be outside, and you couldn't really do a whole lot about it. So I'd say that was the hardest.
About how many miles did you hike a day?
I built up over time. So when I started, I was usually under 10 miles a day. And then by the end, I was usually doing 20 to 25 miles a day.
Wow. How many miles is the trail?
It's about 2,200 miles. So it's 2,190 miles.
Did you see any bears? Uh-oh, it froze.
I think I saw 7 or 8. A lot. They're all over Virginia.
Yeah. Were you scared?
Yes, of course. Bears are scary.
What do you do when you see a bear?
Yeah, so usually a lot of times they just ran away, honestly, before I had to do anything. They're usually pretty skittish. And if they weren't, you just get really big and you shout really loud. And usually I always had someone else there with me. So, there's strength in numbers. So if you have 3 people all, waving their hands and screaming, it was a pretty effective way to get the bear to run.
So it took you about 5 months. If it takes you about 5 months, were you sick at all, or did you feel bad at all when you were hiking? Because I know a lot of people within a 5-month span, you're probably going to get sick at some point or another during that time.
Yeah, I didn't. I know I got bedbugs once, which was
gross. No.
That was unfortunate. So that was like an itchy thing. I know once I felt like I had a fever, but I didn't have a thermometer and I was in the woods, so I just kind of walked through it. I never had like a sickness that was so bad that I couldn't keep walking. So yeah, I mean, I might have had a fever at one point, but who knows, really.
Wow. Oh, sorry, that's my dog. Ozzy, stop. Come here. He wants in the kitchen. So how did you prepare? You can't just like wake up one day and be like, I'm gonna hike close to 2,200 miles. How did you train to be able to do that?
So I started running. I was running more before I left, but it's hard to train for when I was in school before I went, so didn't have a lot of time to do big hikes consistently. And the thing about through hiking is the real challenge is just hiking every day and hiking many miles every day back to back to back. So I tried to be active before I left, but really my training was on trail. So I just started and again built up my mileage. So started small and just kind of trained my way into the hike, if that makes sense. Since that was the only way I could really do it with the time constraints.
Yeah. There's another question I had. I can't remember right now. Give me a second. Okay. So we learned about Daniel Boone and about how he helped make the Wilderness Road. Did you get to see that at all?
I don't think so. I think we learned a whole lot about Daniel Boone.
All right, that was in North Carolina, I think. But yeah. Any other really cool things that you saw on the trail?
Um,
You went to Grayson Highlands, didn't you?
I did. I went to Grayson Highlands, and they have wild ponies there.
It's so fun, isn't it?
Super cool, and they're super friendly. So you can go up and you can pet them. And they had a bunch of foals then because it was
Springtime.
um yeah time. So very cool. I got to pet some foals and pet some little ponies. I had I actually I hiked with hiking poles, and I actually have a bite out of one of the handles because one of the horses tried to take it. Uh, horses like salt, and there's salt in your sweat, and so I'm holding my hiking poles all day, so they had sweat from my hands on the handles. So I ended up having to yank my hiking pole from a wild pony, which was funny. They also tried to. I also almost got a chunk out of my backpack same day. So
Oh,
they anything salty they try to take. And I saw some rattlesnakes. So Pennsylvania has a lot of rattlesnakes, which I didn't know before I hiked through there. It's super rocky actually, and trees in the eastern part of Pennsylvania. So they have a ton of rattlesnakes there. So that was fun. I even have a video of one
oh,
thing because it just wouldn't move out of the path. So,
huh.
yeah.
What was the hardest part in your hike? Which chunk or section was the hardest?
So New Hampshire and Maine are the hardest parts. They have very big, very rugged mountains. So they're very fun to climb, but definitely difficult because they're very steep. And at the top, it's usually all rocks and above tree line. So super windy, and weather changes really fast. And you end up at the top usually scrambling over rocks to get over. And very pretty because the higher you get, the better your view.
Yes, yes. What was your favorite part of the hike? Whether it was interacting with somebody or animal you saw or place you saw, what was your favorite part?
I would say that Maine was my favorite. The whole state is really fun, mostly because you're nearing the end. So at that point, everyone had hit the 2,000 mile marks. There were only 200 miles left to go, which if you think about, that just seems like so little after you've hiked in Georgia. And it's beautiful. The mountains are beautiful. And near the end, it's really flat too. So it's a really cool reward. Once you get through like the White Mountains in what they call the Mahoosic Range in southern Maine, are really big, steep, difficult mountains. And then it just completely flattens out and you just get to stroll to the finish line basically, with a bunch of, there's moose and like all sorts of wild animals, lots of bald eagles, and streams everywhere. So it was just very pretty. Oh, and New Jersey was also very cool, which I was not expecting.
No one's expecting.
No one expected that. Yeah. So New Jersey, is called the armpit of the nation. And so I had expected that the trail would be not awesome, but it actually was basically you would hike. New Jersey was only about 70 miles, so it only took about 3 days to get through. But you hike along this ridge line the whole time. So on either side, it's just like huge valleys on either side, and you're just kind of floating on top almost. And the people were very nice. Every day I was there, people would come and do what's called trail magic, which is where they bring, people who aren't through hikers come out and they bring you treats. And sometimes they bring like candy. Sometimes they will set up like a whole barbecue and like cook food for you. And you don't know them. They're just being very nice because they know that people are hiking through there. And so all 3 days that I was in New Jersey, I got I got 3 trail magics the first day, 2 the second, and then 1 the third.
Wow, look at that. Were there times where you thought that you would quit, that you wanted to give up and that you didn't want to do it anymore?
Yes. In southern Maine, as I said, so that's like, in the hardest part of the trail, and not far from the end. It had been raining when like all the trails were flooded, and you at that point you can't keep anything dry. So everything I owned had been wet for weeks. And also after 2,000 miles, my legs were pretty sore. My knees were a little beat up. So that was definitely one point where I was kind of like, maybe I made it far enough. 2,000 miles is pretty solid. And I think was just really exhausted with all the rain. But I took 3 days off. My mom came and visited and took me to a cabin and took 3 days of rest, and then went back and finished it.
That's awesome. All right. I think that. What was the first thing you did when you finished? When you got to be done, what did you want to do? What was the thing you wanted most?
Oh, that's a good question. So was the thing I wanted the most.
Hang on, you froze and we couldn't hear you.
Okay. Am I good now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I really wanted a towel. That was the main thing.
A towel.
Kind of heavy. So I never had one. And that was like the only thing I could think of was a big, heavy. I wanted a big, heavy towel and a big, heavy mug. So something that's heavy for the sake of being heavy, because everything you carry when you're through hiking is really light and really, minimalist. So only the bare essentials. So I wanted something that was, just heavy, just to like hold something heavy, and not have to carry it for any number of miles.
How heavy was your pack?
My pack, so without food and water, that's what people call a base weight for a pack. So essentially, just all the things you need except for the things you'll be consuming. So my base weight was 11.5 pounds. So that was like my shelter and my sleeping bag and my cooking kit, everything like that. And then if I resupplied and had all my food and water for, about 5 days, it would be about 20 pounds.
Okay. And what kind of food did you pack?
I had mostly dehydrated food. Yeah, that is where if you heat food for long enough at like a low enough temperature, essentially like all the water evaporates, you suck out all the water in it, so it becomes super light, but also like really crunchy and hard. So what you do is you will like take out all the water, and then when I was on trail, I would heat water and pour water back in and rehydrate it, and then it would be kind of like a little soupy mix of like rice and maybe like ground beef or chicken and vegetables. I ate a lot of tuna and crackers, lots of peanut butter, and like protein bars. That was pretty much it, honestly.
Was there anything like when you got done where you like, I really want pizza or I really want donuts or?
Yeah, I wanted a steak mostly.
Yes.
Grilled salmon. My favorite food is grilled salmon. So
no Maine lobster?
No Maine lobster, actually. So my parents picked me up from the mountain that I finished on. And they actually picked me up in, they got a rental car because they had flown in. Mm-hmm. And they picked me up in, it was a yellow Camaro. It was like the Bumblebee, from the Transformers, which was awesome. And so I got to drive that out. And then we went to a hibachi place because that was the only place that was open in the tiny town outside of there. So kind of like what's a hibachi place in DC?
They're not from, so they wouldn't know.
Okay,
But
well then.
they've got hibachi in North Carolina.
Okay, nice. Yeah. So that was good. Very fun.
I'm
Pretty
sure
awesome.
after your dehydrated food.
Yeah.
Oh man. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Would you mind sending me, do you have like a picture or a document that has your packing list?
Yeah, I can put together a list, or maybe I'll just lay it all out and send a picture of it.
Oh, that would be cool too. Yeah, that'd be awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing. It was pretty cool.